Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I'm joined today by O'Neil. O'Neil, can you share a little bit with us about what you do and who you are? Please go ahead.
Sure. I'm O'Neil Franso. I work as a corporate vice president in human resources for an insurance company called Kaufman Group. It's a multinational insurance parent company that specializes in specialty wholesale insurance. Lots of different brands under our wing and lots of different employees scattered throughout many countries across the world.
And with that many employees across the world, you must have a lot of interesting approaches to hybrid work, remote work. Can you please tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we believe in a handshake culture, meaning face-to-face interactions with our clients. So before the pandemic, we did not have a lot of practice with remote work. Of course, collaborating across continents required some of the same methods and skill sets. However, we were not practicing too much of a hybrid work environment, prior to COVID-19, and of course, COVID-19 affected us like it did so many other companies where we had to embrace it. We had to make it work. We found success in navigating a hybrid schedule. And while I think we originally at the beginning of COVID, when they said, hey, 3 weeks to flatten the curve, we figured, hey, we're just going to go back to the way it was. We're going to go back to, entire work week in the office, in person, face to face. Since then, we have embraced hybrid. We emphasize the value of being in person, but we also recognize the benefits and the quality that comes from allowing people the flexibility to work from home from time to time.
Excellent. So let's get a little bit more in depth into it. And I'm well aware of insurance companies. So I work with Nationwide, for example, and Grange Insurance. I'm helping them figure out their hybrid work approaches. And they have somewhat different approaches. I'm curious about what you do, and specifically, what do you see as the benefits of facilitating at least some remote working time for your folks?
Yeah, so the benefits of remote work are too many to count, too many to note on such a quick call. But it starts with being able to get the talent regardless of location. And so sometimes we have a need in a major metropolitan area, but the talent isn't necessarily residing there. They might be residing elsewhere. So remote work and flexibility allows us to attract talent from all over. We've found some success in doing that, and sort of using a hybrid where maybe they don't have to travel nearly as much as they would have under a more rigid environment. So from a business standpoint, it allows people to be able to travel more and accomplish more things in different places that hit business targets that we otherwise would not if we were, chained to our physical desks in a physical office. On the employee side, we see all kinds of benefits. Flexibility allows better work-life balance when that's important to people. That allows us to attract and retain talent, keep them engaged, and in many ways alleviate the burnout that can come from having a lot of responsibilities, a lot of different stakeholders within your own home. You have to serve in addition to your huge workload that you'll have. So our employees find the benefits there. It's helping us attract and retain talent. It's helping us manage burnout. And for some people, they're finding that it's way more productive to have some of that flexibility. It's cutting down on their commute. It is allowing them to stay close to where they're, maybe if they have children, their childcare or their school is, and they're able to sort of create these arrangements that allow them to perform at their peak when they're not distracted. And because a lot of our clients have some of the same issues, some of the same needs for flexibility, the clients are resonating to that. So sometimes you'll have people who have to leave work a little early, go pick up the kids, make dinner, and then at the end of the night, they're opening their laptop and they're working at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And while that's great because they're equally as productive at 9 or 10 as they would be at 4 or 5, the clients who are also doing some of that at 9 or 10 o'clock appreciate it, and they sort of connect they build those connections. They're responding to each other at that time. And what used to be sort of unhealthy, seeing people on their laptops until 10, 11 o'clock at night, in a previous sort of view of the world. Now we're seeing that the clients are connecting to our people because, hey, we're in it together. We're experiencing some of the same things. And so it's building connection, it's creating that sort of benefit for the employees. And when there's a benefit to the employee, there's a benefit to the company.
Okay, excellent. Oh, it sounds like a lot of benefits. I'm curious if you found benefits to real estate. So something that Nationwide did with Nationwide was that they closed almost all of their branch offices and they only left their major headquarters in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm based right now, open. Is that something that you did, or is that not something that you pursued?
It's not something we're actively pursuing. We're actually taking a different approach. We're trying to create the best type of space for our people. So regardless of what their needs are, they have a great place to come to. If that's what they need, we're furnishing a fantastic physical space for them. Most of our employees want to come into the office at least some portion of the time. It facilitates collaboration, osmosis, training, and the client experience is enhanced too. When people are coming in, they're meeting in person, they're doing those handshakes. And it's really, for us, it wasn't about saving money on real estate. In fact, I would venture to guess that our company ended up investing more to create better spaces for our people to come in as a result of this. But what we do is we acknowledge that different roles, different types of jobs, different people in different stages of their lives all have different needs, and we're sort of meeting them wherever they are, whether that's furnishing a nicer office or allowing them to have the flexibility to work from home a couple days a week.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk a little bit about getting to that customization and some of the challenges involved with that. What kind of challenges have you seen with hybrid work?
Yeah, I think well, a lot, and I think a lot of companies are still in their discovery of what the most beneficial solution is to all the stakeholders. I think what we're doing is just looking at each individual. Probably the biggest challenge is managers having to adapt their style and their preferences in terms of how they want to manage and what they want to sort of exert upon their staff and what they want to extract from their staff. A lot of times you'll have a manager who doesn't mind being flexible and managing remotely. And then other times you'll see managers who really want to have face-to-face contact and be able to watch their people in action so that they can evaluate the performance, provide real-time feedback. And so I think the biggest challenge is just understanding what the needs of our people are, understanding what the needs of our managers are, and then working to create a common ground.
Interesting. So we were chatting before the show that I just came back from a 2-week trip where I helped the client figure out for a strategic retreat their hybrid work and remote work schedule. And that was definitely the number one challenge. How do you get managers to support their teams effectively? And especially what you talked about in terms of performance evaluation. So what I do with companies who have a performance evaluation concern, and it's definitely a concern that a large majority of companies have, is to transition away from just having that once annual performance evaluation to having regular strategic weekly or bi-weekly performance evaluation check-ins, where a manager, they still have that once annual performance evaluation, but now they also do a small scale performance evaluation once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on the role and the seniority of the person. So what they do is that they set 3 to 5 goals for the next week or 2-week period. And at the end, just before the performance evaluation meeting in 2 weeks or 1 week, the subordinate would send a report with what they did around those 3 to 5 goals, any challenges they met, and how they handled those challenges, and the self-evaluation. And then at the meeting itself, the manager would talk to the employee about the goals, coach them on problem solving the issues better, affirm or revise their performance evaluation, and they would together set 3 to 5 goals for the next week or 2-week period. And we find that that's really helpful for building a relationship, better relationship between the employee and the manager, and the employee knowing always where they stand, what they need to work on to improve themselves. It's much more helpful for them than just a once annual performance evaluation. And it helps managers be much more confident that their employees are actually performing and doing what they told them to do. So it's just kind of a one tactic to solve the kind of issue that you're talking about. I'm curious what you found to be effective ways of solving the issue of managers not knowing how to evaluate their employees effectively when their employees are working remotely.
Well, you could hopefully see on my face, I was nodding along. That's probably one of the most effective tactics that we found too. More frequent one-on-ones where people can exchange ideas. Of course, doing it in person is great, but I would say probably the one thing that I would stress is the most important and beneficial thing that our managers have done is video meetings where we actually turn our cameras on. You know, there's a lot of literature, there's old studies that show that the majority of the communication and the most meaningful communication between humans is the nonverbal communication. It's the facial expressions, it's the body language. I can use certain words, but it can mean something different depending on if I'm nodding my head a certain way. You can't see that if you're turning your camera off in your meeting on a Zoom call or on a Microsoft Teams call. And you really, you can't synthesize that in a chat or in a text message. You can't get the paraverbal, you can't get the tone of voice or whatever, and that often leads to a lot of miscommunication. So we stress that meeting one-on-one and meeting frequently, to your point, does allow for important exchange of information, frequent feedback, the questions and education of especially less experienced staff being able to be exposed to their manager and grasp those complicated things, and then just turning on your camera and having Teams meetings where you can actually read people's facial expressions, read their body language. It's the closest thing to being in person, and sometimes it's even better than being in person. So you can hear, you can see, and you can use the verbal, the written or spoken communication, and leverage all of those together.
Excellent. So it sounds like you're doing some really effective work there. I'm curious to go back to the less experienced employees that you talked about. One of the things I see, you didn't mention that as a challenge in your initial comments, but I'm curious if that's something you're finding, because I've definitely found with my clients, even with clients who do really well, like let's say Atlassian is one of my clients, and they are well known as doing really well at distributed work, and they only come together something like once a quarter for a few days. Each team comes together, which for most of my clients, it's more hybrid. They come together 2 to 3 days a week in the office. But even Atlassian, they still are working on how to integrate more effectively people who are junior, because the junior people are not getting as much exposure to senior people when people spend more time working remotely. And one of the things that I've worked on a lot with companies is how to set up effective mentoring programs, not simply onboarding for the first 90 days, but mentoring for the first 3 to 5 years. And I can talk more about that, but I'm curious, what if you find that this is a problem? Maybe you don't. And if you do find this is a problem, what you do to solve the challenges of more junior people and how to mentor them, how to get them into the culture, how to make sure that they're successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a different challenge. I wouldn't say it's more or less. It's just a different challenge than the collaboration amongst experienced, tenured employees. Our less experienced employees and our newer employees, I think they're even asking for more days in the office together, and they want to learn. They want to listen to and overhear conversations. So from the top down in our company, we're emphasizing being in the office a minimum of 3 days a week. Some of our teams that are really focused on their goals and striving to accomplish more, and especially if they've got newer members who don't have the chemistry with each other, or less experienced members who just don't have all the institutional knowledge, the osmosis, we call it, of just overhearing conversations amongst 2 of your colleagues who are sitting 5 feet away from you there's no substitute for that. You can replicate some of it virtually, but
Mhm.
we're emphasizing just coming into the office and spending time together. And we're, it's productive, it's engaging. We're educating our managers on making it so that there's a purpose behind coming into the office, and you're not just
Good.
dragging people back against their will, but our less experienced employees who are newer, maybe they're recent college grads. I think they're longing for
Mhm.
the exposure to those managers, and I think naturally there's like a management by walking around components that leads to the mentorship that you're talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, I find that structured mentoring is especially helpful for folks because a challenge I've observed with people who are just getting mentoring by walking around and overhearing is that some people are more skilled at getting mentoring and getting mentored than others are. So some people kind of a little bit slip through the cracks who are not as skilled at getting mentored and they don't know what they don't know. And those are the people who tend to need mentoring the most. So that's something I've definitely found. I'm curious if that's something that you've experienced and if you've worked on solving that challenge at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we do have buddy programs. I think you
Mm,
mentioned not it, going beyond just the onboarding. What we find is that
yeah.
when you assign mentors during the onboarding, they become lifelong
Mhm.
collaborators and partners. That bond and that relationship sort of continues. We we employ and deploy a few different tactics. One of the things we do is the managers themselves are trained on understanding what type of mentorship is
Mm,
needed, and sort of chasing down, hey, either I'm going to mentor these folks or I'm going to
mhm.
nominate someone on the team to do it for
Yep.
me. And honestly, we've not had to do too formal of
Mhm.
a program. I think just in our industry and the type of talent profile we're hiring and the type of
Mhm.
managers we have, they naturally
Mhm.
sort of gravitate towards
Mm,
doing that. So it's not something where we have to nudge our managers or chase them down to do it. They're proactively doing it and they're reporting those
mhm.
actions and results to us here at corporate headquarters. And so we're sort of amazed at just the type of leaders we have in the company.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you're addressing that issue well. Well, as we finish up our conversation, what do you see as the future of flexible work at your company?
I think it's more of the same. It's looking
Mm,
at the business conditions, looking at what are our objectives, who are our clients, who are all the stakeholders involved, and then creating a schedule that matches and fits
mhm.
all of the above. And unfortunately, it means that there isn't a one size fits all. It's not a
Sure.
simple solution. There's no one policy that we as HR leaders can write and deploy that will sort of take care of everyone. This requires active management, it
Mhm.
requires work, it requires research, and it requires trial and error and the flexibility of our employees to adapt to the changing business needs. If you take on a new client who prefers more in-person meetings,
Sure.
you have to make a change and you have to make those
Mhm.
adjustments in order to serve. So we see this as fluid, and we know that it requires a lot of work, it requires
Mhm.
commitment, it requires grit,
Definitely.
and that's the talent profile that we're looking for at our company. So we're hiring these folks knowing that they're already committed and they're already aligned with that sort of thinking.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, O'Neil. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. That was very helpful.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show.